and I'll switch it to you.
Okay. Looks like we lost Erin.
Yeah, she's one of my staffers. I told her to just jump back in.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, Erin's back. Sorry about that, guys. And Jeremy's not going to log in because he was having issues between me and his login, so he'll watch the recording.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe Erin, since I missed you, what I heard was I'm Erin and
yeah, it just cut off. I'm sorry. I didn't know if it was me or what it was. But I'm Erin. I work for the state YMCA. I'm the Northeast District Director. And what was the next question? Now I'm confused. Well, we logged in because I think this would definitely be helpful in working with the students, and if we were ever at a conference or in a school at one of our Y Club meetings, if a student spoke with me or revealed something about this with me, then it would definitely be helpful to know like how to respond and what to say. So yeah.
I'll jump in. I'm Randall from the state YMCA of Georgia. I'm on because I think that Ashley Kalaya is incredible and anything she has to say is worth listening to. So that's why I'm here today.
I'm Rachel with the Colorado Youth and Government Program and the Denver YMCA. Working with a lot of teens, and I've gone to mental health first aid and things like that to where, we're trying to get that kind of emotional, awareness in our youth a little more, and so that they can be more successful. So that's kind of why I'm listening in.
Oh, hello? There.
Hello?
Oh, there, mine's back. Good grief. feel like we're part of the modern day like Lucille Ball routine right now. Yes, now I can hear. Okay. Let me.
And now I don't have your PowerPoint.
All right. Okay. So I would like to look on with you so I can see your screen, if that's okay, and then yes. I'll keep the PowerPoint here. All right. Rachel, if you introduce yourself, I missed where you're from. Would you mind just repeating? Sorry, we're trying to work out some technical. Oh, okay. Suzanne just showed me that you're from Denver.
Yeah,
welcome.
Yeah. Thanks.
And did you say that you have done mental health first aid before?
Yeah, I've done it with our one of the organizations at our community college near here. They did a mental health first aid training. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, I would love to hear more about what you learned through that session as well.
For sure.
And I know we don't have too terrible. Sorry.
Nothing. I was just saying. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, great. Perfect. Okay. So we don't have too terribly much time, and most And I want to be sensitive to a few things, namely that most of the participants have seen a lot of this content before. There is a lot of new content in here that is more practical for figuring out, okay, so we've identified the sort of sources of the position we're finding ourselves in right now, and now we've come to a place where we need to figure out, all right, what is going to be our response system? We have yesterday during my workshop, I did this presentation Youth Worker Summit yesterday, and I asked everybody in the room who had CPR and first aid training, which I think, the Y does a great job of sort of regulating and requiring CPR and first aid and bloodborne pathogen training. And I remember it very well. I know that it's something I've got to have. I have the baseline information that's just in my brain because I've experienced this training so many times. I've never had to use it, though. And I asked the room yesterday who has had to do CPR training, or who's certified in CPR, first aid, and or bloodborne pathogens. And everybody in the room raised their hand. And I asked a follow-up that wondering how many folks had to use their CPR training, and 2 people raised their hands. Then I sort of followed that up with, okay, what about certification in mental health first response? Is anybody trained in counseling or in any kind of first response for mental health issues? And nobody in the room was. This is about 20 people. And I asked how many people in the room had recently found themselves in conversations where they would have found that training helpful, and every single person raised their hand. And that's something that is a very salient point to me. In my 7 years at the Y, well, now if you count my volunteering years since I've left the Y, it's more than 10 years. I have never once had to use CPR. Maybe I had to use some bloodborne pathogens for some extended bloody noses and that kind of thing. And I've been in situations where I really would have loved to have some kind of resources or training in how to deal with conversations that involve the mental health of the young people that we work with. And that's something that I feel like I need. I feel like I use once a month or even more often with the young people that we work with. So my goal is to try to figure out how we as a movement can develop resources where there aren't any, or find the resources that are there, to better equip our youth directors, specifically youth and government folks, with the confidence and competence to handle these conversations, because more and more we're finding the need for them. So I would love for us to spend most of our time today kind of talking about some real life situations that we've dealt with, and maybe identifying what the actual challenges are for us, and where we run into barriers in confronting those challenges, and maybe reworking some of those situations to say, okay, so when this happens, here are some things that we might do. And my hope with that is that we can capture those things and chronicle them in a way that we can produce and share with other folks who are finding themselves in these same situations, and eventually work with YUSA on figuring out what those sort of sanctioned trainings or resource materials might look like. So Suzanne's been a great champion and advocate for that, and my goal is for us to make it as easy as possible for YUSA to step in and sort of codify the resources that we are looking for. So before we move on, does anybody have any specific questions that they would like to have answered or that they'd like to discuss during this session? Because I want to make sure that we spend time on the issues that are feeling most urgent to everyone.
This is Mark. Can you hear me?
Hey, Mark. Sure can.
All right, cool. What I think I'd like to try to see if we couldn't get to some best practice in standard or format there, that if a teen divulges or shares that they're going to commit suicide or have some suicidal pieces, what are some of the next steps people need to use? And I don't think we have anything that they can kind of work with or we can hand out that's available. I'd like to see us kind of get something like that. So we can put it in somebody's hands so they have it. And I know that school systems have already developed that, and maybe some YMCAs already have something that's out there. But I need to kind of put a finishing touch on this piece that I want to kind of put out here in Rochester and use here in New York.
Yeah. And I also, I've been meaning to respond to your email as well, Mark, but I do have, so my plan after this conference is to distill some of the materials from this workshop and the plenary that I'm doing later today, and try to turn that over to wherever we need to send it, or whoever is willing to put it into the format that is most helpful to you all. Maybe we can all figure that out today.
Mm-hmm.
so that we do have that, and I'm happy to work on that as well. So okay, great. So best practices. Anything else that anybody wants to make sure that we cover? Okay, in that case, feel free if there's anything that comes up along the way, feel free to let me know. In that case, I'm going to move rather quickly through the actual slides of this presentation, because most of you have seen this content before, and Rachel, having had first response training before, and Erin, just by virtue of the fact that you have close proximity to Randall and Jeremy, I'm assuming that these are conversations that you're familiar with, so it's not new material to anyone. So I will move quickly through that just so everyone's aware. So we'll skip through this. We all kind of have a sense of who we are and why we're here. So I think we've already kind of covered this, and I'm grateful to you all for being in this webinar, because I think it says a lot about where the movement is headed, that there is widespread recognition that these are conversations that need to happen. So congratulate yourselves for that, and thank you for participating. Obviously, the biggest motivating factor for us being here are the young people that we work with. We have found more and more, I hear it from Y director after Y director, that conversations about depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, all these sorts of things are becoming essentially the norm, and it's no longer one exceptional incident that occurs that is outstanding. It's something that happens on a more and more regular basis. So that's our task now, is to figure out what it is these young people are dealing with and how we can help them navigate, where it's our place to help them navigate. So we've talked about this a million times, and we all have a sense of what young people are facing. We know that there is extreme anxiety, socioeconomic pressures, body image issues. More and more nowadays, there are issues of gender that are coming into play, institutional barriers, that even when young people are seeking help, what do they run into that blocks them from getting that help, and bullying, all of these things that we know are compounded extraordinarily by social media, which is what's, I think, the biggest difference between these issues now and what they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. When most of us were dealing with our adolescent years, we would fight with our friends or our peers, and then it would be forgotten about the next day or the next week. But nowadays, the things that young people are dealing with live permanently, publicly, and are accessible to everyone, and that makes everything that makes what was already a hyper reality for young people feel even more so. So that's something that we want to keep in mind, is just the lens through which young people are seeing the issues that they're dealing with is much different than it was for us, because their lens is 17,000 screens, which was not the case for me. So all compounded by social media. Then there's us, right? We have this idea. We know that the Y is for healthy living. This is a thing that we're for youth development, social responsibility, and healthy living. And I don't think that you can separate the emotional health and mental well-being of the young people with whom we work from any of those major benefit areas that we talk about. We respond to to population trends. We know that if there's a spike in diabetes, we're going to target our national programs to help fight and stave off the impact of chronic illnesses like diabetes. And yet we have not quite figured out how to address increased teen suicide rates, increased occurrences of emergency room visits, or like Mark was saying before, divulging of suicidal thoughts or body image issues, anxiety, all those kinds of things, even though we in fact are the gatekeepers for these young people who are dealing with issues. Anybody have an idea or willing to offer thoughts on what I mean?
I mean, one thing I've noticed, you know, and just even in just taking a group of kids to Kona, they have access to you at a time when, you know, they might not be talking with their parents. They might have issues that, you know, being gone for a week, they kind of think about a lot more. So, you know, we kind of create those relationships, whether we know it or not, and you know, sometimes it's difficult too because we might not see these kids all the time, you know, and so we need to be sure that we are kind of noticing those signals and noticing, you know, any issues that might kind of raise an eyebrow, so to speak, and that we might want to be aware of some deeper issues that they might have. So that's kind of my thought.
It looks like we may have a small glitch as Ashley and Suzanne may have been put off for just a second. As soon as we get them back on, we'll resume the webinar. Ashley, are you still with us?
Can folks hear Ashley?
No, and we can't see her screen either.
Okay. When
What was the last thing that you heard?
Shortly after Rachel stopped talking,
so you didn't hear anything she said?
yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything after I talked.
Did you hear Mark talking with her?
No.
No.
Oh wow. Mark, she asked if anybody wanted to talk. You take it.
We heard Mark say a few things, and then somebody else was talking.
We had asked if there were specific things we wanted to discuss.
Yeah, and Mark said he wanted best practices.
Yes.
So we did hear that.
Okay. Did hear that. Did you all hear or see any of the slides?
No.
Okay.
And we're not seeing your slides now either.
All right, she's working on pulling those slides up.
Okay.
You want to? Oh, you'll have to send it to me, and I would have. Oh, Randall has them, right? Wait, there they are. There they are.
Okay. All right, so
Maybe.
let's go back. This.
Yes, right.
And now it's, why isn't it?
Very cool. There you go. There you go.
Okay, we're going to try this again. All right, so best practices. We talked about the fact that we are all aware that young people are experiencing their developmental processes differently than the way that we did. You know, there's the standard just craziness and chaos of developing as a human, which already includes awkwardness and anxiety and uncertainty. And then we also have these added layers of the fact that everything that young people deal with nowadays is public and permanent, and everyone has access to it. So what for us may have been a blip on the radar, a fight with a friend, whatever the case may be, now for the young people that we work with lives on permanently through social media. So they're dealing with all these things, like pressures, socioeconomics, anxiety, body image issues, all of these sorts of barriers that are now compounded by social media. So young people, in this time of their life when they don't really know what their identity is, they're having to simultaneously cultivate two different identities. The identity that they live in real life, in person, when they're in school, at home, and the reality that they live on social media. And that is an additionally complicating thing that we need to be sensitive to because it's a different lens than the one that we have. So what does that mean for us? We are, for these young people, and when I say we, I mean the YMCA is for healthy living. It's one of our benefit statements. That, along with social responsibility and youth development, those are the things that we own as a movement. And I don't think that you can separate the emotional wellness of our young people from those three things that we take on as a movement. We're great at responding to population trends. We know that when we see spikes in diabetes rates, that as a national movement, we're going to develop programs and initiatives that aim to target and reduce the high rates of obesity with among our members. And yet we hadn't really figured out how to respond to increases in teen suicide rates, increases in trips to the emergency room because of panic attacks or anxiety disorders, behavioral disorders, eating disorders, all of these different things that we still haven't quite landed on how we're going to address as a movement. And for a lot of these young people, we are the gatekeepers. And what I asked the last time is if any of you had any thoughts on what that means on us being gatekeepers. So I'm just curious to know what that means to you all. I'm hoping that you heard some of that.
We did hear it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we heard it.
Yeah. So thoughts on what makes us gatekeepers?
Well, I'll go again. I had kind of said a little bit before, but like I said, you know, we come at them at a time when they feel maybe a little more comfortable opening up, and you know, we might only see them for so long. Like for example, Kona, you know, I took a group of kids that I don't often talk with, but you know, they are opening up things about their lives that, you know, I'm kind of seeing it from a much different perspective than maybe their friends and their family do each day. So we kind of have that, you know, unfiltered, you know, discussions with them, but, you know, we only have so much time to actually connect with them in that way. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So we know that we're dealing with teens when they are typically when they feel at home with us, and not just, I don't just mean us as directors, but you know, their Y family more broadly. We see at Kona and at our conferences that young people by and large are feeling more comfortable and open, but also this is a sort of temporal thing. It's a moment in time that we get them, and this is not something that that makes it easy for us to figure out how to, you know, how to try to capture all of the emotional development of a young person's experience in the time that we have with them. So what do? We know we face all sorts of barriers ourselves, and all of this I think is probably obvious to you all. So we won't go into it too much, but we have a lot of institutional barriers and emotional barriers to dealing with these issues, to being comfortable dealing with these issues on our end. We don't want to make the wrong choices. We don't want to do any additional harm. We don't want anything we say to trigger a young person to react negatively. And that fear can be paralyzing. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session is how we can kind of get over that paralysis and identify, okay, we're here, we're in this moment, whether we like it or not, so now what do we do? And I think that there are some things here that are pretty obvious. So where we start when it comes to dealing with young people, we start having a difficult conversation about, so to Mark's question, what do we say when a young person divulges too much? Well, first we need to rewind a little bit and ask ourselves, before we bring these young people to the mountain, or we take them to a conference, or we bring them to an event, or whatever the case may be, have we done anything to build up trust with them? That's something that starts from our very, very first touch point with the young people that we work with. And building trust with young people starts by noticing them as human beings. This is the thing that can go the absolute furthest with a young person, is to say, you know, oh, so-and-so, you are, you know, I noticed that usually your of what's happening at the conferences, and I'm not seeing that from you right now. Is what's going on? Or maybe they're usually, you know, kind of shy, but usually, you know, every time you do have something to say, it's always very valuable. I've noticed that you've been extra quiet lately. You know, is there anything going on that you want to talk about? Starting building trust before you notice that there's, or before a young person divulges something big like that is part of our responsibility. We need to figure out what are the ways that we can let each young person know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, it's something that takes you a tremendous amount of time, but what one statement can you make to each young person that you deal with that lets them know, A, that you notice them, and B, that you care? That's all it's a pretty simple formula, I think, for building trust, and of course every student is different, and it might not all based on what I've observed, and what are the other pieces of the story that I'm missing? Maybe that's something that's going on at home with the parents. Maybe it's something that's going on at school that we're not aware of. Maybe it's, you know, it could be any number of things. But the point is, we will not be a valuable participant in a conversation with a young person unless we have checked what our own assumptions of the situation are. And then finally, inviting participation, asking a young person, letting them know, A, I'm here, and B, I am available to you, is a piece of this equation that you can't live without, because in no way are you going to be able to have a real, genuine conversation with a young person unless they feel like they're choosing to participate in that conversation. So this is a picture of as part of the workshop yesterday. This is Kevin Jorgensen and Tommy Caldwell, who just recently climbed what's considered the most difficult climb in the world. It's the north face of Yosemite. The name of the mountain is slipping my mind right now, but it's in Yosemite National Park. And these guys spent days together, literally hanging from the side of a mountain, climbing up foot after foot after foot, and in each step of the way, one had the other's life essentially in his hands. And they talk about, they were asked what led them to be able to accomplish this, and the idea of building up trust and building up partnership is quintessential. So they spent a lot of time before they even got on the side of that mountain working with each other, learning about each other, how they communicate, how they, how they like to work, and that's what enabled them to achieve this massive, massive thing. And what we're doing may not be, the sort of life and death climbing of the most difficult mountain, but it is a version of that, trying to help young people navigate development. And unless we do our part to sort of build partnership prior to getting on the face of that mountain, then we're not going to know how to be good partners to those young people. All right, anybody want to guess what the steps are with where we start with their guardians, parents? Take a wild guess. Can you guys hear me still?
We can hear you. We're not very interactive today.
Okay. Okay, just making sure. Well, so I'll give you the answer. It's the same. When it comes to dealing with parents, we don't ever want the first conversation that we have with a young person's parent or guardian to be, oh, hey, this massive thing just happened. I am not a parent. I have a dog, and when people talk to me, make suggestions about ways to care for my dog or parent, be a dog parent, maybe better, oh, have you thought about this, or have you? There is an instinctive reaction that we can have to that. That's you don't tell me because I know, and I can only imagine that if I've experienced that emotion when it comes to dog parenting, that people experience a million times that with their children. So approaching parents and guardians in a way that lets them know that our guard is completely down, approaching them with curiosity and non-accusatory language, saying something along the lines of, oh, usually Randall is one of our kindest delegates. He's always the first one to offer help, and he's always very engaged with the people around him. And I've just been noticing that maybe even his behaviors have been a little bit different and not what I'm used to seeing from Randall. I'm wondering, what if there's anything that I can do or what we can do together to figure out what's going on. Essentially inviting those parents to participate the same way that we would be inviting the young people to participate. This is a picture of me and Tommy Caldwell just to show you guys how cool I am. Okay, so this is kind of the meat here of what I wanted to talk about, and
if you all could ratchet up the interactivity, this would be the point that we kind of want to get an example going to develop some best practices. So, does anybody have an incident that maybe occurred recently, or that is still, that occurred a while ago, that is bothering them, or that you're still uncertain as to what, how to approach the situation from a YMCA best practice standpoint? Anybody willing to share anything like that we can use it as an example? Maybe I'm wondering, Mark, would you be willing to describe a little bit a circumstance that you've dealt with recently that was making you wonder about best practices?
I think sometimes it's like I get a call from a teen that says some kid is acting a little bit differently, or is really out of sorts, or has even made some suggestions that they want to kind of end their life in using some of that type of language. And so it's like, okay, well, what are the next steps? Or the standpoint that a kid starts to use that, but suddenly, you don't have the trust with that one teen, but you might have the trust with the other teens that are divulging or sharing with you about this concern. So it's then, how do you then make the next steps? And so sometimes, for me, it was like making a connection with an advisor, or asking, well, who else did they know? Who else did they travel with? So that then that person then is the person who might be able to then create that, have a dialogue with the parent, where I may not have that because, for example, a situation occurred where I'm on a bus traveling home, I have a couple colleagues, they're on the bus, a couple of teen kids, leadership kids, they're on the bus, talking about with this other teen who's now talking about ending his life. So I don't know him as well as maybe the other advisor might know that student. And so in conveying that, then the advisor knows the student and was able to make a connection, which did do, with the parent. But it's like sometimes if I'm a new person, if I don't know to do that, what might be my next step? Where do I go? And that's my concern. It's just, we need to do some training for some people, and maybe as we do that, we have some steps or some protocols that walk people through. So I don't know if that's helpful to what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful, because I think what we're dealing with here is a few layers of stuff, right? There's an instance where we are the first line, where the young person in question is we are directly talking with them. Then there's a circumstance where maybe another young person is coming to us and saying, here's this thing that's happening with my friend, and maybe we're close enough to that friend to address the issue ourselves, and maybe we're not. So if we're not, then how do we approach the young person who's concerned? How do we coach them on what to do? And how do we engage with parents or any other concerned parties? And I'm going to use, Mark, your example. I'm going to use this as if we are dealing with the young person, him or herself, who is confronting the issue. And then we'll extrapolate from that what we can do if it's a concerned friend who's coming to us. So say we have a young person. We've had. I'll use an example from a delegation a few years ago that I was with, where this young person is great. She's bubbly and gets along with everybody really well. She has a flair for the dramatic occasionally, but everybody just kind of expects that from her. And during roundtable one night, she kind of disclosed that she made slight references to an eating disorder. And the roundtable chair, everybody was positively responsive and supportive of her and that kind of thing. But nobody was really sure, okay, well, so what do we do? Do we have to be, like, do we step in? What do we say? And so we ended up not really addressing it. And I spoke to her individually and said, if this is what I know to be true of you, and if there's ever anything that you need to talk about, we're here for that. She wasn't wanting to talk about it at the time. and there wasn't really much else that I could do. So fast forward a few days, and it's the last night of the conference, and this same student expresses the fact that sometimes she has suicidal thoughts. So at this point, at this point there are a few things that need to happen. And I would love to hear, Rachel, from you, what your sense of this is, but from the perspective of a facilitator of a group, something like a roundtable, you have to acknowledge it to the group, right? You can pretending that somebody didn't just say something very, very big and very important doesn't really serve the rest of the group. So that's step number one, because I think a lot of times we want to just get past the issue as quickly as possible, and that leads us to handle it swiftly and usually irresponsibly. So step number one is acknowledging to the group. So maybe it's saying something along the lines of wow, Mark, that it sounds like that was a really difficult thing for you to go through. You can say, if you feel compelled, you can say, I'm sorry that's something that you dealt with, or anything along those lines that's not overly reactive, but also doesn't sweep it under the rug. So acknowledge it and say, I would love to talk with you more about this after the roundtable. So and so. Why don't you take us to the next question, and then just move smoothly into whatever the roundtable discussion is, or calling on somebody else to say, why don't you take us forward in the roundtable. So acknowledge it in a way that doesn't pass judgment, but also doesn't over dramatize. Then afterward, you need to have a conversation with the young person, and that formula, I think, is fairly straightforward. So the idea is you got to just ask them questions. So inquiry, that's step number one. And this is honestly just classic conflict training. Asking a young person, do you want to tell me more about what you were going through? And listen with curiosity. Don't be scared beforehand. Obviously we all have our own emotions that we're dealing with here, but just be curious with them. So do you want to tell me more about that? What was it like for you? And have all of the questions focus on their experience, not on offering them anything or trying to intervene in any way. Just be curious until they're 100% done talking. That's going to help you do a few things. It's going to help you understand more of the picture, and it's going to help you normalize whatever the person is saying to you. Because rather than reacting with oh gosh, we've got to stop the whole group conversation, or oh, we've got to move on, we've got to talk about something different, rather than having something that's overly reactive, which can have a negative impact on the young person, you're saying, oh, okay, so this is a thing that's been going on for you. Why don't you tell me more about that? In a way that signifies to that young person, oh, what I'm saying isn't crazy or weird or abnormal. It's just something that happened, and I can talk about it like it's something that happened or that is happening. So, I am so sorry to hear that you're having suicidal thoughts. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? When did it start? What do you think was the trigger to it? Or what is causing you to feel that way? Anything like that gets them talking a little bit more is going to help us out. Rachel, do you have anything? Is there anything that you would add to that, just in terms of sort of first response training? Anything that you feel like is important to know?
One of the things that they emphasize, especially when it comes to just everyday kind of like sometimes I have suicidal thoughts, is a different statement than I want to kill myself. And so it's kind of risky because, in some of it, what they emphasize asking for somebody who might come to you saying, I want to kill myself, is, do you have a plan? Because, you know, and that shows that person that, number one, you're taking it seriously, and that you're not just blowing it off, but that it gets them thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not actually going to kill myself, but I'm thinking about it, you know. So it kind of immediately gets out of the way that thought of, you know, if that is a true, like if they are thinking about it and they have a plan and they know when and they know how, that's something that, you know, we are not capable of identifying the severity of it. That's where we would have to call, you know, a helpline and get them help, and then stay with them so that, you know, we can find that help. So that's kind of that first response that I would go to, you know, and it's a scary question to ask. It's definitely not an easy one, but we kind of have to identify, is it just that they're having suicidal thoughts, or are they actually planning on, you know, committing suicide? So that's kind of one thing I took away from, you know, the training I went through.
That's a great distinction, and I also think that can apply to any number of situations. You know, whatever feelings it is that a young person is expressing, you know, whether it's you know, I cut myself sometimes, or I am experiencing X, Y, or Z. Asking questions in such a way that you can kind of get to the bottom of, how is this something that you're just, you know, not just, is this something that is that are thoughts that you're having, or is it something that is going to consume your behavior, or change your behavior, or dictate your behavior? So Mark, to your point, I would say starting with that question and then being curious. Then the next step that we have here is, and I want to be, just so you all know, we've only got a few minutes left because they're going to start workshops in this room pretty soon here. But I'll be happy to share this with you and pass along a worksheet that we develop out of it. The next step that we have is this acknowledge piece, showing understanding. And to me, this is a big one because you may not understand, but that doesn't matter for your ability to and your need to acknowledge what the young person is going through. And this all goes into what I call normalizing the behavior, which I know, you know, there's a lot of negative reactions to using the word normal, but I actually think that that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be letting these young people know that the challenges that they're facing may feel isolating, but in fact they are not alone in those challenges. So acknowledging what they're going through in a way that makes them recognize, oh, it's not crazy that I'm experiencing this. It's a thing that people go through sometimes, that some people go through sometimes. So acknowledging what it is the person has said to you in a way that lets them feel like they are A, not alone, and B, not crazy. And it may, you know, and that may be somebody saying, oh, so-and-so hates me, and your thought may be, well, that's not true. But what you would actually need to say is something along the lines of, oh, I can see how you might think that, or, you know, how it might feel that way to you. And then continuing that line of questioning, getting to the bottom of it. And then what we want to do is offer support in a realistic way. So, there we go. We obviously can't fix problems for young people. We can't make their depression go away. We can't fix the problems with their family, but we can say, okay, so it sounds like this is what you're dealing with right now. So for Mark's example, we've got a young person who is concerned that their friend might be thinking about killing him or herself. So we listen to that. We ask questions. Do you know if your friend has a plan? Have you talked to your friend about that? Have you talked to anybody else about it? Has your friend talked to anybody else about it? And then you acknowledge, I can see how that's got to be something that's really tough for you to deal with. Since you care about this person so much, it must be hard for you to bear that burden. I would love to help navigate this with you. There are some things that I can do and some things that I can't. Now we know that there are some instances where we are mandatory reporters, so we need to let young people know when that's the case, when we think they're in immediate danger. And then outside of that, we can offer to be supportive. And that might look like a lot of different things. To Mark, to the young person that you mentioned, it might be, I would love to, help you navigate how to have a conversation with your friend. Because if we're not close enough to that young person, and we know that they're not going to be open to us having that conversation, then what we can do is try to help the friend come up with a plan as to how they can use the inquire, acknowledge, support model with their friend or with the parent. And the same goes for parents. When we may or may not feel comfortable having a conversation with an adult, but we also want to make sure that we are saying that we're letting them know, I'm here because I care about your young person. I care about your child. I want to know I want to hear what's going on for you, what you're experiencing. Here's what I know from your child. Here's what I'd love to know from you. This must be challenging, but I would love to help navigate however I can. And that is essentially, the closest thing that we have to a formula for how to have these conversations. We can't always have them ourselves, and when we can't, making sure that the person that we're actually dealing with has the formula is essentially the best thing that we've got, right? So looks like we are about out of time, but I would love to know just sort of what your reactions are to this, and if there are any kind of examples that come up to you that you want to work through. What do you guys think? Any reactions?
Do you know who does these first aid classes, or not first aid, maybe a first response class might be, or a course, or is there anything out there for dealing with some mental health issues that might pop up around these top issues that you've raised today? Is there anybody doing anything out there like that? Do you know?
Yeah, there are. Actually, maybe, Rachel, where did you take your first response class?
Ours was the Colorado Behavioral Health Care Council, so it's a Colorado specific one, but they do have, and I don't know if you can look online, oh, here it is, mentalhealthfirstaid.org, looks like, because they have a book for, the youth mental health first aid. They offer classes, again, I mean, this is just in Colorado that I did it, but for up to, it can be as young as 14-year-olds can go and actually take that class. So
yeah, there are several different versions of that, I think, that have some really good material. So that would be my final, my sort of in closing, Mark. I think, we're working with YUSA to come up with what our sort of, what our version of this would be. And in the meantime, the slide that I have up right now has some additional resources where you can find these sort of curriculum pieces and things like that. And then the resource that Rachel mentioned is that's a really great way to access an active training for dealing with that. And I think the more Y directors we can have that are trained in that, the more we can sort of learn from one another. Here's what you do. And even if it's secondhand training, because Rachel took it with this organization and now she's telling us about it, that's still more than what we've got, right? So I think every little bit is helpful right now. So Mark, if you end up doing one of those trainings, I would love to learn more about your experience and integrate that into the materials that I have. And maybe, next year at Kona will be, maybe that's what we'll focus on, or maybe we'll do an actual video training that is a first response training the same way that we would make child abuse prevention and first aid training available. I'm certainly happy to take that next step.
Sure. Good.
All right, well, I think we've got to clear out of this room. Any final questions from anybody? Anything that we can wrap up with?
All right, Ashley, thanks for your time. Great presentation. Sorry about the technical glitches that we've experienced.
No problem.
As a reminder, this video was recorded, and we will be providing a link to it in just a little while.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for doing that, Randall. I really appreciate it. And this is my contact information. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I welcome resources, feedback, anything that you want to see more of or less of as we start to figure out what the next steps in the development of this training is. I would love to hear those ideas. So feel free to bombard my inbox or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And thank you all for participating.
Thanks, Ashley. Everyone have a great day.
Take care.
Yep.
Oh, also, Emma had her baby. Ah!
Yay!
Yay.
All right, take care, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.